Good morning, algebra. I hope all of you are doing all right and trying to find ways to keep yourselves occupied during our quarantine. George, in case you're curious, yeah, I'm still bald. For the rest of you too, you have a few questions. My hair didn't magically grow all of a sudden since we've been quarantined. But this is enough of my face up on the screen. So I'm gonna do some notes now, and then you'll have an assignment to do. And you guys can feel free to send me questions you have over email. I post my office hours on Classroom, so if you need to get a hold of me, go ahead and email me. I'll be checking email other times too during the day as well. All right, here we go. So before our school year was so rudely interrupted, we were working on the greatest common factor, which is this GCF thing you see right here. So I don't know if you guys remember, but we talked about exponents and variables and how they work with being greatest common factors. So when we look here, we've got two terms, and this is a little bit different than we were doing before. We got to find the greatest common factor from both of these. We did this with numbers before, but not variables. But variables aren't that much harder. So if I look here and here, if you remember some of the things that we keep in mind, it's the biggest number that we can divide by. And that's terrible. Let me try that again. Haven't had my coffee yet. Divide by. And then the smallest exponent. All right. So if I look at both of these things, if I notice there's a 1 here and a 7 there, because remember 1s are invisible. So I don't have a number, so I don't have to worry about that. But I do have two variables. So I'm going to pick the smallest exponent on that list. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, which is x to the 7th, and I'm going to put it out front, and then I'm going to open a parenthesis. Okay? So this is the reverse of the distributive property. Remember rainbows, pumpkins, unicorns? So now what I'm going to do is just like you did with numbers, is you're going to divide each of these things by the thing out front. And if you remember from our exponent unit, when you divide exponent by exponent, you subtract. So that will become x plus 7. Because when you do 7x, or x to the 7th, divided by x to the 7th, it goes away. It's just a 1. So the way you know if you're right is if you can go back and distribute again and get the problem you started with. So x to the 7th times x is x to the 8th. And then x to the 7th times 7 is 7x to the 7th. So that checks out. So that is going to be my answer. All right, just like we do all the time in math, we're going to take the simple concept and make it a little harder. So we're going to look for first the number that works for both of these. And in case you forgot how to do this, I have some handy dandy factor charts attached in Google Classroom. So if you look at this, here's a factor sheet. So I'm going to look at a 2 and 10. So I'm always going to start with the biggest number on the smallest numbers list. So here it's 2, and I want to see if 2 is in this list, and it sure is. So that means that 2 is my greatest common factor. So I'm going to factor out a 2. Now, we also have letters in both things, so we can't forget those. So if I look, remember, it's the smallest exponent. Okay, commit that to memory. Biggest number, smallest exponent. So in this case, the smallest exponent was y to the 3rd. Okay, now this is where it's going to get tricky for some of you on dividing, right? So I'm going to take 10y to the 8th divided by 2y to the 3rd. I like to do the numbers first because it's easier for me. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. Feel free to use calculators for this. And then when we take our exponents, I have y to the 8th here and y to the 3rd. We subtract those. I'll put it on a note here, subtract exponents. When dividing. All right, so they get 5y to the 5th, okay? Which is great. And now what we're going to do is do the next thing, which I'm going to look at this. 2y to the 3rd divided by 2y to the third. And I also, don't forget, you have the plus sign in the middle, so that plus stays there, plus 1. And that is my factored answer. And again, if you want to check it, you can do rainbows, pumpkins, unicorns, and figure it out. All right. 2 more examples, and then I'll set you free to do your work. All right, so what I have right here is I have 21, -9, and 24. So what I'm going to do is go to my handy dandy chart. I'm going to look here. I'm going to look at 9. So I have 1, 3, and 9. All right. And so I'm going to look at 21, and I'm going to see if 9 is on this list. It's not, so I'm going to go back, and I'm going to pick 3. 3's on that list, and I also had 24, and 3's on that list also. So that means 3 is my greatest common factor. So I'm going to factor out a 3. Now I have to look and see 2 now. This is where it gets tricky. Pay attention, is I have a variable there, there, and there. And the smallest exponent just happens to be this guy right over here, which is just x. All right, let me try to write that nicely so you can actually read it. Then open parenthesis. Now I'm going to divide each of those 3 terms by the thing out in front. 21x to the 8th divided by 3x is going to be 7x to the 7th. All right, and now I have, don't lose this, I have a negative here. So I have -9x squared divided by 3x, which is going to be -3x. And then finally I have plus 8, because x divided by x, those cancel out. All right, and then I'm left with that. All right, one more problem, and then you guys will be good to go on your assignment. So I'm going to look at 45, 81, 63, and 18. And if I were to look on that chart and find all 4 of those numbers, I would know that 9 is the biggest number that goes into all of those. So I have a 9. And then if I look, I notice out here that this 18 doesn't have a variable on it, which means we don't have to factor out a variable. So all the variables just stay, which makes our job a lot easier. So that's 5x to the 4th plus 9x to the 8th minus 7x squared plus 2. Okay, even though that problem looked harder at the beginning, it's actually easier because that 18 had no variables on it. All right, so you're going to work on assignment 39 for today and tomorrow, and then by the Thursday you'll have a quiz that'll be up on MyMath. These are both on my math lab. So I would try to do this by tomorrow, and then this done by Thursday or Friday. All right, email me with questions. Let me know. At some point, maybe not, I don't know if I'll be able to get it done in time, but we can maybe pick a time we can do a Google Hangout as a class. You guys can ask questions. We can say, hey, and we'll go from there. Have a good day, everybody.